Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hey, thanks, Roger. And now, as ever, to the newspapers. I've chosen the Sunday Telegraph to start with today. New Tory alliance fights to stay in the EU. Interesting, that story has been given to one of the most Eurosceptic papers in the country. The Sunday Times has the Burkina Faso story, that massacre there. Very good coverage of that. Their political story of the day is this little story here at the bottom of the page, PM's secret EU master plan. They claim to have 3 tiny little rabbits to come out of hats for that, and more on that later on. The Observer has a story about global air pollution. The Independent on Sunday has a very interesting interview we'll talk about later on, I'm sure, with Jeremy Corbyn, and it's got a story about people smugglers. And then finally there's the Mail on Sunday, EU shock. Outvote storms 6% ahead. That is a bit of a shock, because the outvote has been behind before, and this is possibly a turning point, which we will discuss almost immediately with the papers. Julia, shall we start with that story?
Yes, indeed. I mean, as a Eurosceptic, I'm delighted by that, although still a little bit sceptical about whether it will actually be delivered on the day, if and when we actually get the referendum this year or next year. Because we are in this situation where a lot of Eurosceptics have been complaining that over the last few weeks it's only the pro-Europeans who've been in the cabinet able to stand up and say what they want, and that therefore this is kind of fixed. Well, it doesn't seem to be fixed very effectively. No. Well, there's an attempt at a fix, as those things always are with the Conservative Party when it comes to this, because they are in such a bind about it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I love the way that the Daily Mail has put this, white on black to emphasise how dramatic the surge is. I mean, I think what people are saying is that it's things like the migration crisis, the economic crisis, and the attacks in Cologne that have pushed the get out of Europe vote higher. And it speaks to the kind of Europe or the kind of Britain that we want to be. It seems to be that there is a massive sort of ideological battle between the far right that have a particular kind of xenophobic hardline approach to migration, that are pro-austerity, and then a progressive current that's coming through Europe, not just in the UK but across mainland Europe, that is, do we want something that's more progressive, that's based on better wages and labour equality and freedom of movement, crucially.
Julia's got her punch-up face on at the moment.
There's literally nothing about Europe that brings us higher wages. The reality is, look, I'm a progressive.
There is. No, it guarantees labour wages.
I'm a progressive. I'm a Democrat. I believe in national sovereignty, and I believe in democracy and an accountable government, and that is what people who are voting to leave Europe want.
And I agree with you. Look, the EU is hugely anti-democratic. It's secretive.
But you'll vote for it.
It's bullying, and it's pushed a very pro-austerity agenda. I agree with you that needs to change, but I think we should reform it for the better, to move in a more progressive way.
Let's return to the papers. Rachel, you've got a spread from the Mail on Sunday there as well about that.
Yeah.
Looking at the potential leaders and so forth of different campaigns.
Well, this story is basically reiterating what we've just said about the reasons why the anti-Europe vote has surged, and it's also suggesting that if Boris Johnson were to join that campaign, then more people would want to leave Europe, which for me cements the argument against that.
I find it quite depressing, actually, that people will decide their vote based on, I like him and I think that he's wise.
I don't believe in the end they will they? They'll do it on gut instinct and what the Prime Minister brings back from Brussels.
Well, and
you have the Sunday Times story there.
Sunday Times
I said 3 kind of relatively small rabbits. Tell us about the rabbits.
Well, the rabbits are so small. I mean, I've got to be honest, they're so small, they're barely worth mentioning. They're sort of nonsense stuff that we found out about a year ago was going to be the big, look what amazing deal that David Cameron has brought back from Brussels. He fought so hard, the European leaders were against him, but good old David Cameron brought them back.
All
and
right,
they're going to be
three attractively coloured guinea pigs then.
Listen, don't just guinea pigs, I'm a guinea pig owner. But this is the thing, they're meaningless. They're just about having Britain having a status that's in the outer tier, about us, Parliament being sovereign. Well, hold on a minute, we've been told for the last 20 years that Parliament is sovereign. They're meaningless and they're nonsense, and these white rabbits, or guinea pigs, being drawn out of the hat, they may well, because David Cameron is fairly well trusted by the British public on lots of different sides of the political spectrum, that they may well be enough to I think, fool the public into thinking he's won a reform that is meaningful. He won't have. There is no meaningful reform that the European leaders are going to allow.
Let's move on to another kind of leader, Rachel. Jeremy Corbyn interviewed by the Indie on Sunday, and quite a kind of affecting interview. He talked about everything from croissants to bicycles and everything in between, and Trident and so forth.
No, this is actually a really good interview in the sense that the man is actually allowed to speak and outline his policies, which we've heard quite a lot of in the past few days. One of the main things that he's put on the table is the issue of addressing the sort of massive wealth inequality that we've got in this country. We're not all in it together, as it turns out. 99% of us are dealing with declining wages set against rising living costs, peddling like crazy just to stay in the same place, if not go slowly backwards, while the 1% are getting more and more of the national wealth.
And what another story in the same
Corbyn
paper,
is trying to do is to address that, to make society more fair and more equal, not just because in and of itself that's a good idea, but because as it turns out, that is better for the economy. You generate more wealth if society is more economically equal.
I agree with him in terms of the aim, certainly it seems to me, I personally don't want the government interfering with when a private company shares out its dividends to its shareholders, which is what he wants to do and what he announced to the Fabians yesterday.
Interesting alternative. There's another policy here, isn't it, we should explain, which is that workers should get a percentage, I think only 5% of profits.
Yes.
So if a company is very profitable, some of that goes straight to the
I think that's absurd. It's no business of the government telling private entrepreneurs who started a business and maybe taking huge risks, remortgage their home or the like, to actually go out and then hand over some of their hard-earned money. They should pay people a fair wage, and I'm absolutely in favour of the national living wage being higher and it being legally required. But telling them whether or not they can pay shareholders, no. Just make the living wage a minimum that people can actually. If you work a 40-hour week, you should be able to afford to pay your rent.
That would all make sense if wealth trickled down. But hey, it doesn't. It's a mystery. It just doesn't.
It's not a question of wealth trickling down. No matter,
of course it is.
We live in a capitalist society. If someone starts a business and they pay people a fair wage, in a free society, they want to work for them. It's no business of the government to go around taking a share of their profits to hand to their workers. It's no business at all.
It's a very loaded.
Very quickly, and then let's go on.
It's a very loaded way of putting it. First of all, most people companies aren't paying those wages that they are bound to do.
Yes, they are. Most companies pay way above minimum wage.
We are supplementing.
To most of their staff.
We are supplementing their minimum wage with tax credits.
I agree with that.
And secondly, it's not working. It's not trickling down. Do you want a fairer society?
I do want a fairer society, but not by taking other people's money.
Let's move on, if you don't mind, to Trident now, which is the next story on our list.
Of course, Trident was going to be a battle. Well, it barely mentioned, of course, the Fabians yesterday, and certainly not by Corbyn in his speech to the party faithful. But a number of Labour members, Kevin Jones, of course, who resigned from the Shadow front bench, has spoken out about the duty for Jeremy Corbyn to back Trident. So much of the Labour argument, though, seems to be about jobs. Now, £100 billion a year, or £100 billion cost of Trident, it seems to be a lot.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years, is an awful lot to spend to save jobs. Now, jobs are important, but per job, that's an awful lot of money. The issue is it's about national security and it's about being a player in the world. And the question is, look, in the 1980s, when Labour were for unilateral disarmament, how did that play with the British public? Not very well at all.
Well, we'll come on to that, I promise, at great length later on in the show. But before we do, Rachel, you've got another story about the internal debate inside the Labour Party.
Yeah, the internal debate, it's partly about...
You're both being far too sparky. I have to keep moving things on.
Well, because there's so much to say. There's so much to say about Trident and the fact that it's, being turned into this sacred cow of security because you're making it. Most defence officials don't even agree with that assessment. Most defence officials are saying that actually the best way to defend the country is not with outdated Trident, but you're turning it into a matter of national security.
Let's return, however briefly, to the newspapers.
Yes, this came up in the Fabian Society, where Corbyn again, demonstrated why he's so popular with a party massive, putting together an alternative kind of politics that has resonated so much.
Did you just say the party massive? That's a great new phrase.
I don't think I invented that phrase.
With a party massive.
I don't think I invented that phrase. Anyway, what would you like? The party faithful? Is that
party
more
massive is good.
BBC
It's just
compliant?
new to me. I'm just old and used to it. It's good.
Let me bring you up to date. So there is a split between the New Labour section who think that, you know, what the election told us was that Labour needs to be more centrist and more austerity light, and there is the other side which supports what Corbyn is saying, and which, you know, public support seems to corroborate, which is that actually people are looking for an alternative kind of politics. We need an opposition to austerity. We need popular moves like renationalisation of utilities, like massive investment in infrastructure and public services, and that seems to be the tussle within Labour at the moment. What kind of Labour do we want it to be?
Don't look at Julia when you say that. Just set her off. And I want her to
That's why I looked
finish
at
the
her.
news. I know you did. I know exactly.
Like,
I can read you both very well. Now, the last story I want to discuss was Blue Monday. It was nothing to do with the Conservative Party.
Nothing to do with the Conservative Party at all. Blue Monday, does it add up? The third Monday of January every year, we were told some years ago, is Blue Monday. Combination of your Christmas debts, a bit of misery over the weather, and sort of back at work, slog of the year ahead. Apparently,
and it's the grimmest day of the year.
But it turns out there's very little scientific evidence for
there's
this.
a
Well, what
surprise.
kind of science would back that up,
I know.
to be
If
fair?
it's sunny tomorrow, we'll all be happy. That's the
All right,
reality.
question. How many newspaper stories are based on bogus university research by researchers trying to boost their grants and get a story into the newspapers?
I can't. None at all.
90%?
None at all.
95%?
Hard-working journalists would never fall for that.
Listen,
Anyway, two hard-working
End of
journalists.
paragraph, a survey said, full stop.
Two hard-working journalists. Thank you both very much indeed.